Okay, so podcast episode one.
All right.
Do you want to introduce yourself and tell the people who you are?
Yeah, my name is Baszucki. I have type 1 bipolar, and I'm interested in all kinds of treatments, medication, and sleep and diet and other things and exercise that I've tried. And I'm really excited to do this. So I don't think the illness gets enough treatment and a sense of publicity, and the huge stigma and address that. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I get to share my story. So, yeah.
Awesome. My name is Ian Campbell. I've had type 2 bipolar disorder, and I'm now a PhD student researching mental health. And I've been talking to Matt a lot about his story and how he's come to view bipolar in a different way in recent months through trying some different health and dietary interventions. And we're going to talk about some of that on this podcast. So, yeah, so there's not many people that talk about bipolar. There's so much stigma around having bipolar disorder versus it's cool almost to be depressed or to be almost anything to do with mental health. Now it seems everyone's on the bandwagon, but for some reason things like bipolar and more kind of severe conditions like that are very stigmatized. What's your feeling about that? Like, why does that happen?
It's interesting. I mean, I think to a certain extent, there's the sanity issue where even people who are super depressed still retain some element of sanity, whereas bipolar and the psychosis or in the mania that's often associated with bipolar, all the sanity is lost. So, well, yeah, I mean, the people that I see on the street now who are homeless people who are crazy, who are talking to themselves. I see them. I think to myself, like, that could have been me if something had changed, something had gone differently.
Yeah,
But the illnesses that are most closely associated with losing one's sanity, bipolar and schizophrenia,
yeah,
I think for that reason they're just treated very differently, and depression is also more like understandable. Even like I talk to people, I tell them I have bipolar disorders. A lot of people don't even know what that means. Like, well, what
yeah,
does that mean? You have like, I have to explain, like, I have mood swings,
yeah.
and the extent to which the illness can affect a person. The
Mm,
hardcore depression, and then the mania and what it looks like in the symptoms, and
yeah.
the a lot of people just are unfamiliar, whereas depression, it's very easily understood. So yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons. Mm.
One of the things that's cool is how you're so open about having it. Like when we first talked, you were just straight away like, "This is what's happening with me." And the thing I noticed as well is the massively positive response to that. It's like so many things were really heavily stigmatized in the past that now people have come to understand more and to accept more. And unfortunately, it seems like bipolar is still in that category of stigmatized. So part of the reason we're having these conversations is to bring this out into the open and talk about what is it like to have bipolar. And me and Matt are to some extent survivors of bipolar in an age where not many people do recover from it or get well enough that they can live a functional life. And part of the reason for that is we've kind of stumbled on some things that are very helpful to us in our health and well-being that might also be broader reflective of broader trends in psychiatry and metabolic illness. So what's your story with bipolar? How did it start for you, and when did you first notice something was different? And what was the first signs for you?
So I had my first psychotic break when I was 19. I'm 24 now. Um, and it was a like full on psychosis with delusions. Um, I mean, there were so many. I ended up in the psychiatric ward for 2 weeks,
Oh,
locked in. And in retrospect, I was hospitalized 4 times over the course of about 2 years from when I was 19 to 21,
oh,
and all for mania, full blown mania.
yeah,
And when I look back, I don't think my mood fully settled between each episode. So I thought I was coming back
yeah,
to normal, but then I would start doing drugs and my sleep was off, and there were other factors that just threw me, and I couldn't
yeah,
get stable. I was medication non-compliant for a while.
yeah,
In retrospect, I look back at my childhood and the symptoms are very clear now,
yeah,
even from the age of maybe 13 or 14, that this was happening to me
yeah,
periodically, but I just didn't recognize it at the time. And it wasn't significant enough to warrant psychiatric treatment because no
yeah,
one no one really saw it yet. But I can think back to lots of times in high school where I was just behaving inappropriately or getting very little sleep, waking up early.
yeah,
Whereas, like, bipolar one, the momentum of my illness is towards mania. And so I can look back and it's very clear to me. But this destroyed my life for 2, 3 years. I mean, I couldn't
Mm,
go to school, I couldn't work, I couldn't. I mean, I didn't even. It's like a haze for me now because I didn't know what was going on, and I would come out of one psychotic episode and I would be medicated, and I would sometimes get back to some semblance of normalcy, but then
mm,
I inevitably would something for some reason I would become psychotic again and I
mm,
would be hospitalized. And I had periodic depressions. They weren't too bad. Like I said, the momentum of my illness was always towards mania.
mm,
But I mean, it was just devastating. I mean, and I got out of it. I remember I was about 21, 22
mm,
when I finally called my mom and I said, Mom, like I want to get better. Like I can really see that
mm,
something's not going well here. And then it took the next 3 years, basically the last 3 years, I've spent just piece by piece trying to figure out how to
mm.
manage this illness. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, it was terrible and it was scary. And I was hitchhiking and I was homeless for a period of time.
Oh,
And
man.
it was terrible.
So when you were at college, and you're having these episodes, what was that like with your friends who were, just going out and living their life day to day? And sometimes, it feels like when you have these illnesses, it's like you have this invisible 200-pound backpack on, and you're in this marathon with everyone running along, and nobody can see this backpack you're wearing. It's like this is invisible challenge that you're doing. What was that like being at college and people not understanding what that
Yeah,
was?
it's tough because my symptoms were so strange, and sometimes there was much more going on in my head. But maybe I came off as just a very excitable person.
Yep.
But then, as my mom has told me, it was sometimes easy for me to hide, even
Hmm.
though there's maybe some psychosis or delusions going on.
Yep.
So I think for my friends didn't really know what was going on with me,
Mm,
and I disappeared off campus after my initial episode.
mm,
So no one really knew what was happening to me, and I came back, and people would ask if I was okay, but no one
mm,
really knew. Um, I was lucky enough to meet a few more people who were bipolar. I think there's something specific about bipolar one or having the psychosis
mm,
that when I speak to people who are bipolar one or schizophrenic who have had
mm,
this, um, but I was fortunate. A deep, I've never had a depression that um, I would say was really at risk. That I was really at risk for suicide.
mm,
Um, and um, I've spoken to lots of kids who have had that, and
mm,
kids who have attempted suicide. Um, I'm in a group for bipolar and depression, but we meet in the weekends, and we had a
mm.
couple attempted suicides.
Oh,
But to answer your question, no one just no one understood. Like, no one knew
mm,
what it was. Like
mm,
no one could recognize my symptoms and pinpoint like, okay, that's
mm.
an episode of mood elevation. It
Sure.
was just like someone acting weirdly. So
Yeah.
there's a big lack of education
Yeah.
um, among even my friends who are nice, like good college educated kids.
Yeah. And that's one of the weird things about bipolar is people assume that it must mean that you're just this wacky person all the time, or you have, this constant different way of being. But actually, a lot of bipolar people, like when I talk to you, you seem completely normal. And I know you're a lot better recently, but even I bet if I met you 5, 10 years ago, you would have seemed like a normal person. And a lot of this stuff, the kind of suffering and the kind of difficulty with it is private and hidden from the world. So did you feel like your friends would see you mostly as kind of just a normal friend of theirs, and that you were privately dealing with this, or were you open with them about the illness at the time?
I was open with my close friends
Yeah.
early on, but um, the work, it's been very much a um, quiet persistence because,
Mm,
and I was speaking about this in a different group the other day, and I think we spoke about it too, the fact that this process of recovery is very quiet and removed
mm,
from public appreciation. Like my
mm,
mom will tell me she's proud of how I'm doing, but things like education or degrees or
yeah,
jobs or other things like that have easy public recognition, it's not the same with this illness.
yeah,
So even to achieve a normal mood and a consistent normal mood, which has been very difficult for me and for which I've worked for years
Yep.
to just get that. And like I said, it is taken me like piece by piece,
Mm.
doing different things to and taking it very seriously.
Mm.
And even now I still have a rocky mood some of the time,
Mm.
to even just
Yep.
live normally.
So, what was the turning point for you where you were like, you said there was this moment where you're like, I need to get better. I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to talk to her about, we're going to work on this. And what was the point at which you were like, this needs to change, something needs to happen?
I mean, I had insight, and when I realized how crazy the entire adventure had been. I mean, I was so manic that I thought it was normal to just go leave and go hitchhike
Yep.
and live this crazy lifestyle. So I had to make a few key decisions. One was to stop drinking and doing drugs,
Yep.
and one was to exercise, and one was to manage my sleep,
Yep.
and later manage my diet when I learned about the ketogenic diet.
Mm-hmm.
And I did other things like meditation. I gradually put practices and habits in place that were conducive to health.
Yep.
Like I would notice I could pick up on 3 4 a.m. like if I went to bed that late,
Yep.
the next day I could feel the something starting to pick up, like it was that fast
Yep.
for me. And
Wow.
I recognized that. And just the I have to be, and even caffeine, I have to be very very careful with a lot of things, just because the momentum, the illness just wants to take me, an impetus.
Yep.
So initially, so I had this, so to answer your question, I had this breakthrough, I think that was in 2018.
Mm.
And then I was super depressed for a while. Um, Eventually, I transferred colleges to a bit more stress-free, Santa
Mm-hmm.
Clara University. I got, I started exercising regularly, and I started sleeping consistently.
Yep.
And those were the two lifestyle changes, sleep and exercise, initially, that were the most important. And what happened was I got a taste of living a normal life.
Mm.
Like I still had incidents where my mood was off and inappropriate behavior that was clearly a result of
Mm.
some sort of hypomania, but I got a
Mm.
taste.
Yep.
And so I got hungry,
Yep.
and I got I sort of honed in on the, I think it's called the Pareto principle, with where 80% of the results come
Mm.
from the most essential 20% action. So I try to zone in on the most essential 20%
Mm.
of actions that could help with my illness, help me stay help me stay stable.
Yep.
And the and it was really sleep and exercise and meditation helped me,
Yep.
and then diet. And what it came down to for me was adherence on a regular basis. Uh, I'm now at a place where I think the latest I've gone to bed is about 12:30 in the last maybe 8 months.
Nice.
Um, where um, and I like, just over the course of about 2 years, I gradually added one thing. I would slip up and I would go to bed late, and I would
Yep.
I'd feel miserable, and then I would course correct the action. And it's really hard because my friends, like, some of my friends, dude, they eat they eat like ice cream and smoke weed and
Yeah.
stay up till 5, and like, I'm 24 and I don't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky I get to live this amazing life where my mood is stable. I get to do podcasts like this, and I get to talk to people, and I get to um I get to do I get to do amazing things now with my life. But
Yep.
like, it's a sacrifice.
Totally. And
Mm.
so you're like a disciplined person. You do weightlifting and going to the gym and running, and you're looking after your diet. And how big a part do you see as that discipline being in you getting better? Was that a real turning point for you when you're like, I'm going to apply this discipline to the illness and just, do everything I can?
Yeah, um the discipline was everything. For me, yeah, complete discipline in a few key strategic areas: medication, compliance, sleep, exercise, diet, therapy. And and giving myself a little room. Um, if I want to like watch TV, for a while, or if I want to, go to a movie, or like leaving my lifestyle a little bit more fluid in other areas.
Yep.
I mean, the discipline is a lot of it comes from um, my desire to help other people who have this illness and to preach these kinds of habits. So then I
Yep.
have to do it. A lot of the time, it's not like I don't want to go to the gym, but or go swim or whatever it is. But
Yep.
when I think of another kid who has the illness, and if I want to advocate these types of behaviors, then I have to do them.
Yep.
So that's where a lot of my motivation comes from. Honestly, I think it's not enough for me for my own life. But when I
Yeah.
think of kids like in the psych ward who just don't know what's going on, who are crazy or depressed or suicidal or whatever it
Yep.
is, that's where a lot of my motivation comes from.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of people, they just, a lot of people don't understand what this is like for someone that's like got this level of depression or this level of mania. Like depression with bipolar is a whole different ball game to if you have, like regular, regular depression. This is like, ultra depression. It's very kind of like physical, like you can really feel it in your body. It's not just like a thought pattern. It's like a physical illness that takes over your body. And they can show this in blood tests, with like lactate being elevated and all kinds of markers that show that this is like a real physical thing that your body goes through. It's not just some like thought loop that you're going to go to a therapist and talk through. Your body is going into this physiological state of depression. Can you describe what that was like in your experience to experience depression? Like, what did it feel like to you? Compare.
It's just overwhelming, and it's like this fog that just everything, muscles, body gets lethargic, mind is slow. Feels like it's going to be incessant, even though I know it will end.
Yep.
I hope it will end.
Yep.
um it's like the worst. It's like terrible. No, saps the motivation, any motivation to exercise or to do the things that help me. It takes like the energy that it takes to do those things is tenfold.
Yep.
um and yeah, it's just, and it doesn't feel fair.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, it's just the worst. It's the
Yep.
worst feeling.
Yeah, it's like a real thing that descends on you, isn't it? It's not and it's the thing is it's so random. The things can be going great in your life, like things can be brilliant and things are going well, you have your friends around and you're having a good time, and out of nowhere these depressive episodes can come with almost seemingly no reason, which is very hard to understand for someone with bipolar. Like, why would that happen? And how did you experience mania? What was it like? I mean, it sounded like you had some real adventures with hitchhiking, and can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I will say is that physical action always helped my depressions more than like talk therapy. I mean, talk therapy
Yeah.
has been useful for me, but things like exercise and getting outside, even getting sunlight, those have helped me a lot more.
Yeah.
As for the mania, um, I had delusions. Like I was convinced it was Plato reincarnated when I was in the hospital. That was one of my big ones.
Did you say Plato?
Um, Plato,
Oh,
that's right.
dude, that's a sophisticated one. That's awesome. Like, that's much better than ones
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I had that one. I would meet like a woman at a treatment center who's dressed in all black. I'd be convinced she was a witch. And it's very funny because experientially, when I was psychotic, this all seemed very real to me.
Yeah.
Receiving private messages through YouTube from like spiritual figures, spiritual figures.
Yeah.
A lot of my psychosis had a spiritual element, so spiritual
Mhm.
enlightenment,
Yeah.
like you know metaphysical stuff, etc., which I've learned is
Mhm.
not uncommon actually, and is not
Yeah.
unique to my case.
Mhm.
But I remember one time I thought I was a prophet. I was in South Central LA, and I had thought people were going to come gather at this square where I was hanging out. I mean, it was complete psychosis.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to come out of these episodes too, even if I was like months
Yeah.
of taking Zyprexa and taking other medications, even
Yeah.
in a high dose, to come out of these, um, and a long time where, to finally get stable,
Yeah.
because I found that I could have hypomania and mania, but these types of the delusions associated with psychosis, that was
Mm.
a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was very scary, and my family's very scared for me and worried about me the entire time,
Yeah.
and it's hard to, it's like it's very criminal, because my mind was always the one place where I felt I was safe, and I have
Yeah.
opinions and I can and think whatever I want, and when that was hijacked,
Mm.
it was like it was very disconcerting, and it threw me off for a
Mm.
long time.
It's so interesting you bring up Plato, because he actually talked a lot about the link between he called it theoria mania, which is like kind of like translated as like divine madness. And he said that the greatest poets of the Greek age were these people who had this quality of theoria mania, which is this kind of like, elevated mood and creativity in periods of it. But then they also had these like really bad depressions at the same time. And he saw these as he regarded them so highly. Like he really saw them as a valuable figures in society that have their place and their role to play as long as they are able to utilize what they have in the right way. But did you feel when you were in the psych wards, did you feel this was fully pathologized to the point where it was denying some of the value you have as a creative human being and things that you can contribute to the world in your own unique way of thinking?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, a full blown manic episode, um well, very creative period for me was unsustainable.
Yep.
So I'm naturally if I can just be healthy, I naturally maintain a pretty high level of energy.
Yep.
So I naturally have some of that creative spark when I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, absolutely, I mean, this is why like a manic episode, an episode of mood elevation is so attractive to so many people. You can
Mm.
clean your entire house. You can go on a bunch of dates. You can like buy a bunch of stuff. You can
Yep.
gamble. Like it's very exciting to be in
Yeah.
that initial initial stage in that
Yeah.
manic episode before some mood crashes, and often a depression will follow, and obviously that's
Yeah.
terrible. But it's why it's such a difficult illness to treat, in my opinion, because people are unwilling, especially initially, if they don't have a large wealth of evidence that there are consequences to these types of periods with mood
Yeah.
elevation. It's difficult to treat because people don't want to give this up. People don't want
Yeah.
to give up the feeling of being in an elevated mood state,
Yeah.
because it's amazing. And why should they, right? Why should
Yeah.
they want to give it up when you're getting all this stuff done and you're so happy all the time and euphoric and sleeping 3 hours a night?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a really, it's hard to treat for that reason.
It's such a weird thing about the illness. It's such a high and such like an expanded experience of life that it's hard for anyone to imagine what that feels like. It is, it's so different a way of it. It's like a different lens you're viewing the world through. And a lot of this, I think there's a huge percentage of like kind of Pulitzer Prize winning poets that were bipolar because they had this really almost like enhanced view of the world when they were in these states, and they were able to do very fast processing of information and share that back with people. And there's something valuable about that in the literary arts and the creative arts. And obviously so many musicians and creative thinkers were bipolar, like Kurt Cobain or Jeff Buckley, or there's a whole list of people in that kind of vein that were this way. And so it's very tricky because you can't imagine why people would not want to be medicated or made better, but it is true, like a lot of people feel like that. And so you were going through college, like you had these really difficult experiences. That you've got to tell us about the hitchhiking episode. What happened?
I was at a treatment center in Oregon, and I was psychotic, and I didn't want to take medication. I had this big idea for a long time that taking psychiatric medication was going to impede my spiritual growth, and it was a very difficult sticking point for me to get past.
Yep.
Because once that idea latched on, that I wasn't
Yep.
as awake or aware when I was on this medication, then for years I didn't want to take it.
Yeah.
So I got out of there because I was going to be hospitalized if I didn't take medication. I hitchhiked from there down um, through California, and then I was in Monterey area for a while,
Mm,
which I ended up in Southern California, and I was homeless and psychotic, and
mm,
I thought I was like traveling. I
mm,
mean, I was just full blown psychotic, not taking any medications, and finally,
mm.
my dad found me, and I was hospitalized, and that was my last real psychotic episode.
Oh, man.
And what was so concerning about having four of these is I talked to some of my friends who have had maybe one hardcore episode
Mm,
of psychosis, and these are people who can take 900 milligrams a day and see very very minimal disturbances in mood.
mm.
Whereas for me, because with each progressive episode, the likelihood of another increases. Because I had four,
Yeah,
then my body is just adjusted to ramping up. And so it
yeah,
just wants to ramp up. Um, my personal experience was that marijuana was a big trigger and set me manic
yeah.
frequently. Um, that's just my experience. And I cut marijuana and alcohol out of my life a little over a year ago. That helped
Yeah.
me immensely. Um, so yeah, I mean, I just think but I will say is that now, like having done all of this, having gotten an amazing psychiatrist and medication that works for me, and the ketogenic diet, obviously, which we can speak about, and the exercise, managing my sleep. I'm luckily now I'm at the point where most of the things that I worry about in my life, like normal person problems. But this was my goal. Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to worry about normal person problems,
Yeah.
like school or work or girls or friendships. So I mean, it was a long. So I mean, we could talk about that more, the recovery, but it was a long process of finding a system that worked and finding habits that worked that allowed me to stay stable.
It's funny. I used to think the same. Like I used to see people having a barbecue with their family and just enjoying themselves and and I was like, wow, how do you achieve this? It was like to me that was like the same thing as looking at, like achieving this amazing goal in life. It was just to be normally kind of happy, able to enjoy like a simple, day out with your family, things like that. These they seem so far away at that time. So, so what led you to? So part of the reason we're doing these podcasts is because Matt and I have fortunately been keeping well, and we seem to be one of our first wave of people that have coped with this illness a lot better than most people have in the past. And the thing that changed it for us both was making a dietary change. And there's this diet that's used in epilepsy. It's called the ketogenic diet. And if you have epilepsy, you can go on this diet. And what it does is it switches your body from using glucose as a primary fuel source to using these molecules called ketones as a primary fuel source. And in epilepsy, this reduces seizures by about 50% in 50% of people that try it. So if you go to any kind of kids hospital in the UK, they have a whole ketogenic diet specialist team that take people with epilepsy and put them on this diet because it changes the brain's metabolism. And what was your experience like when what led you to the ketogenic diet in the first place?
My mom heard about it, and I had already tried it a few years ago, but my mom, who's does extensive research about the illness, found this diet and thought it would be helpful. So I started it 6 months ago, and it's a tough diet. It's a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. It took me a little while to get adjusted to using fat as fuel, essentially, instead of
Mm,
glucose. But what I found was, my strength in the gym came back, my speed in the pool came back. Um, I my sleep improved, the quality of my sleep improved. I had a tremendous assortment of benefits aside just being having a balanced mood. And
mm,
I'll give you some metrics just to describe how much of an impact it had on
mm,
me. Last year, when I went through the equinox in March, which is a difficult time for me, and I think for a
mm.
lot of bipolars, because the rate of change in the length of days
Yep,
is high. So the days are getting longer and
yep,
longer and longer, or shorter and shorter. I was on 25 milligrams of Zyprexa at one point last year in
yep.
2020 when I went through that transition, just to keep my mood stable.
Mm,
This year, I was able to stay at 5 throughout the entire month,
Oh,
essentially the month of March. And I'm still able to stay at 5, and even having some brief potential disturbances in mood. I have not had to go above 5 milligrams of Zyprexa, which has been the go-to anti-manic drug for me over the last 3-4 years.
oh,
I've not had to go above 5, and I've been able to recover and keep getting sleep.
amazing.
And so it's just been unbelievable. So I always say, and my dad and I have been saying this for years. Well, my dad has, and I finally, I guess, that it's sleep, diet, and exercise. And the ketogenic diet was such a huge part for me. Um, and I know there's a lot of, there's a lot of scientific literature about how it affects people with epilepsy and why it might
Mm,
work. But I'm just so excited that we're finally discovering that this could work. And we have so much anecdotal evidence about how it effect can be. And the last point I'll make is that I think it's hard people normally people to associate a dietary change with an improvement in
yeah.
psychiatric symptoms. It's just something that doesn't normally register for people, that type
Yeah.
of connection. People think, oh, biological problem in the brain
Yeah.
requires medication, necessitates medication. I hope people can start to challenge the idea that it has to be a medication and start
Yeah.
to, and I think I get why, because people say, oh, well, this is such a serious problem. You're proposing that a diet can impact my mental health.
Yeah.
At face value, that should be an obvious concept
Yeah.
to take seriously. The fact that the food that a person puts in his or her body can
Yeah.
impact his mental health. So I mean, it's really exciting. And I hope with the podcast we can encourage more people to do the diet. It's very difficult. It requires adherence and
Yeah.
discipline, but the benefits for me personally, I can speak for myself, have been overwhelming.
And how would you describe the difference between like how was your daily life before doing keto and like what did it change for you? Was it the just the being able to rely on your mood being stable, being able to rely on having enough energy? What was the main difference for you?
Energy, sleep, less stress that my mood's going to go crazy. Because for me, if my ketones are in a good place, even if they're like 1.2, 1.4,
Yeah.
I have very good confidence that my mood is going to be stable, and then I can get good sleep. Also, there's just this overwhelming sense of relaxation knowing that I'm not eating a bunch of sugar, and
Yeah.
there's like this plus confidence eating a diet that I am specifically eating to treat my bipolar disorder. It's like I'm
Mhm.
checking boxes.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm doing exercise, I'm doing sleep, I'm taking medication, I'm eating a diet that's specifically meant to help me with bipolar.
Yeah.
Now I can relax because I'm doing what, and it's in God's hands at that point. Like,
Yeah.
so that's another big part of me, is when I know that I'm doing everything I can, I
Yeah.
don't have to worry, because then I can just live my life, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, I mean, I come from the land of deep fried Mars bars and fish and chips, and like, it's the worst. We have this iron brew drink. It's just like liquidated sugar that you mainline, and it's the it's the worst place to be. Having metabolic illness, but funnily, enough, this is actually something that I ended up trying as well through like purely just trying to lose weight. I wasn't interested in anything to do with the mid side of it. And I was just trying to lose weight. I was like, if I'm going to be depressed, I just don't want to be like depressed and fat. Like I'll just be depressed, if but at least I can be thin. And so similar, like I tried it and had this incredible turnaround to the point where it was like the lights had gone back on my brain for the first time in decades. And so when you tried keto, was there like did you notice an adaptation period or a change, that there was a kind of amount of time it took for it to really take effect? When did you first notice that something was different?
So I started the diet January 3rd of this year, 2021, excuse me. And I didn't have an initial, I've talked to doctors, and I've heard about how during the initial adaptation phase there can be some mood disturbances. I
Yeah.
didn't have that. I transitioned very easily into the diet,
Yeah.
although I did notice my sleep was a little off and my strength and other things. After about 3-4 weeks, I started to adjust, and my sleep improved a lot. which I track. I'm first of all, I will say I'm surprised at the kind of food that we can make um, with that's low carb food. It's actually
Yeah.
quite good. The diet has been. I live with a bunch of guys who eat a lot of carbohydrates, so it hasn't been easy the entire time, especially when I see all these carbs. But gradually, my cravings for carbs started to go away. I think
Yeah.
after the first month or two,
Yeah.
when I got used to just eating a lot of fat.
Yeah.
Um, I have a lot of liquogen, so what's that? C8, partially C8, for extra fat, and I've been experimenting with not having too much protein, having enough
Mm.
but not too much, and eating out at restaurants. I sometimes my ketones go down because I think they hide carbs in their food. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even food that is ostensibly carb free,
Yeah.
but I mean the benefits, to answer your question, have been far beyond just mood stabilization. It's just there's something about when my ketones are high, my brain is running on fat. I mean, even just not having like dips in energy because I have low blood sugar. I mean, that's been
Yeah.
tremendous impact for me because
Yeah.
I used to have low blood sugar 4 hours without eating, and my mood would kind of get irritable, etc. I don't have that anymore,
Yeah.
so I can fast until 2 p.m. if I want to. Like
Yeah.
I don't have to eat if I don't want to, and just start eating at 2 because I don't have low blood sugar.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I heard someone describe it as I think it was Dave Asprey, someone on the Bulletproof podcast. He was like, it's like hypoglycemia, you know, like it's just this thing that
Mm.
happens. People's mood drops when they don't have sugar in their system. And like I don't experience that anymore at all. Like I have this consistent energy level, which is incredible. And to contextualize this, this isn't just something that we've experienced. This is something that hundreds of people are reporting online in forums. There was this study that we did a couple of years ago, just looking at how many people online are talking about this, and it was a study trawling through internet forums using a text mining script and saying how many people are talking about this. And we found it was around like 174 reports of people talking about this diet, which is just bizarre because it's not really a diet that's associated with mental health. And it was
Mm.
showing that an incredible percentage of them were reporting benefits. In fact, over 80% of the reports were saying this is really helping me. And quite a large percentage were saying that we've actually gone into remission, like we no longer have the illness, which is quite remarkable. And there's emerging case studies coming out from scientific papers. So there's Dr. Chris Palmer at Harvard is publishing his case studies of his patients with bipolar that are going into remission or getting significantly better on a ketogenic diet. There's now a clinical trial happening at Stanford. We're going to have a study in Edinburgh testing this, and it's starting to come out that there's something happening here. Lots of people with these severe mental health conditions are experiencing the same thing that Matt has experienced. And it's not isolated incidents anymore. This is starting to become recognized in the literature. There's lots of reviews coming out on ketogenic diet and psychiatry. And there's also a beginning, people are beginning to understand the mechanisms behind how this might work with ketones acting like an alternate fuel source in the brain. So I think this is something that's going to become more talked about as the years go on. And it's cool to be doing this podcast with you because we can start to help share some of these stories and to raise awareness about this. Because, when you have a condition like this, I'm sure your experience is the same, is that there's very few options and it almost feels a little bit like, let's throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And it feels very hopeless when you have these severe depressive episodes. And you can certainly, I can remember times where I just felt like I just want to be able to look after my family, and I just don't have the capacity at this point when I'm in a severe depression to be able to do that. And it's heartbreaking. Like, you are able to be completely normal and capable, and when you go into these depressions, you're just, everything is taken from you, every ability to do the normal things you need to do. And it is truly heartbreaking. Like, you really get to see what normal life is like, but you also get to have that, all of that taken away from you. And there's very few options. Whereas doing keto, like, it's a completely different paradigm of experience in terms of the wellness and the stability and the energy you get from it. And it's like nothing that I've ever was offered when I was younger growing up with this. So do you see how do you see the ketogenic diet working? It could be that this is an alternate fuel source for the brain, that it's improving insulin resistance in the brain. Do you notice a certain level of ketones gives you more stability or less stability?
Mm,
Um,
I I have had problems when sometimes I like between 1.5 and 2.5. I like is
yeah,
a good range if I can keep them there. So I have problems and they're frequently under that.
yeah,
And so when they've gotten to say point 3, point 4, I've had problems before. I've been irritable.
yeah,
Um, but it's just it's frustrating because a lot of the time I eat perfectly or what I think is perfectly, and still my ketones are not quite as high as I want them.
yeah,
When I got sick and I fasted, they were up at 5, and I
yeah,
was close to ketoacidosis, 5 or 6, and so I
mm,
had to drink some apple juice.
yeah.
Um,
And just to explain for
but
people, oh, sorry, to explain for people listening, ketoacidosis
mm,
is when your ketones go super high, like more than they should.
mm.
Yeah,
But I try to I exercise, so I think that helps with the ketone levels. I try to keep them in 1.5 to 2.5 if I can.
yeah,
That seems to be a pretty good range for me in the evening.
okay,
Um, and what that means is I don't eat carbs. I eat very few carbs,
yeah,
protein, and I pile on the fat. A lot of, a lot of MCT oil and a lot of breads made from, almond flour and different nuts and avocados and other stuff like that.
The thing is, as well, we're eating like kings out here. We're eating a whiskey, where you can drink whiskey, you can eat. I don't personally do that, but you can have steaks, you can have like cheesecakes made with sweeteners that taste almost like the real thing. It's a good life. Like people, when they come around to eat with us, we're having like a barbecue every day almost, and you can eat bacon. So what more can you ask for? It's I never feel like I'm missing out ever really on the diet. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, easy to maintain weight too. It's not like weight gain is a lot harder because of the insulin resistance and the appetite on
Yeah,
ketogenic diet. So it's a very easy. I mean, this is why people like this diet. It's a good diet for weight loss. This is
yeah,
why so many people do it. It just happens that we've kind of discovered implicitly that this happens to be really good for mental health and for epilepsy and for other things like that. And I hope that the doctors will get on board, man. That's my hope.
yeah.
Like that's my big hope, because unfortunately, this is not, this is so new, so novel that the medical school, they don't really, obviously, they don't even look
Yeah.
at this.
Well, it's interesting you say about the range that your ketones are, giving you mood stability, because that lines up really well with what happens in epilepsy. These people, having seizures, and at a certain ketone range, their seizures just either stop happening or drastically reduce. So there's some thing about this ketones as an energy source in the brain that stabilizes the brain. It stabilizes the excitability of the brain. And so there's a lot of research to be done there that's going to be fascinating. And it's been cool to see that we've been speaking to some doctors and scientists who are really getting interested in this. And there's some really amazing scientists that are working on this. There's, I came to this through Danny Smith, who's a psychiatrist in Edinburgh, and my father, who's a professor of epidemiology. And they're both now working on this and making it a project. At the university, there's Chris Palmer at Harvard, there's Shibani Sethi at Stanford, there's Cynthia Kalkin, like professor at Dalhousie University. There's a whole team of really, really smart people now starting to turn their attention to this. And there's also other people like us that are talking about this publicly. So there's Carrie Brown, who does these amazing talks on YouTube that are about her recovery from bipolar and a ketogenic diet. And there's loads of people starting to come out. So I hope with this podcast we can encourage people to talk about it and to make this a thing, because something is happening and the science will eventually come through. But already we can, we'll hopefully have our friend Wim on the next podcast, who's a guy from
Mm,
Holland who has been in remission for, I think it's around 6 years. And he had very severe illness beforehand. Now he's in remission and he's dedicated his life to spreading word about this. And he has a sort of like online course where he takes people with diabetes and walks them through recovering. So it's, yeah, something is really starting to happen, and we're going to document it and try and figure this out as we go along. It's going to be a bit of a detective journey. It's going to be a bit of science. It's going to be a bit of speaking to people, and it's going to be a whole lot of butter, because that's what we're eating.
Yeah.
We're doing bulletproof coffee, which is this butter coffee that people drink. We're doing so it's going to be great. But I think this is really important what you're sharing, and you coming out and telling your story like this is is really brave and remarkable, because so many people stigmatize this illness. And just the fact that you are open like that, and you're a person who's living a great life, you're healthy, you're succeeding in your life, you're chasing things that you're interested in, and you're succeeding, it's like this means a lot to people, because so many people with bipolar are sitting in their room somewhere just like suffering, and they don't think it's even possible to have a normal life. And it's heartbreaking. Like, I spend days and years on these forums talking to people with bipolar, just trying to, and I'm just so tired of trying to talk people out of, being suicidal. And because I just want to tell them there is hope for this, but if you can't see it outside the traditional, uh, if you don't have options available to you, it does feel like that. And it's so heartbreaking to continually go through this process of seeing people spiral into this hopelessness and this. So seeing someone like you that's healthy, that's out engaged in your life, you're like smashing it, and you're someone with bipolar and you've applied your discipline, you've applied courage in talking about this, and you've refined your diet, you've looked at every aspect of life, and eventually it's kind of led you to get better like this. And you're one of the few survivors that has got to this level. There's so many other people that are still stuck in dysfunction and this kind of
Mm.
despair that this condition brings. So I just want to say thank you for sharing, and thank you for being open about this and talking about it. It inspires me, it inspires other people to do the same, because there's very few people talking about this that have it. And so hopefully we can start to shift some of these stigmas about it.
Thanks,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to share in this. Um, that's my hope, right? That's my hope for this, is that someone sees this and maybe tries the diet or tries something and see that it is possible. It's possible to go through the ringer and then come out and do some things and live normally. Like it's
Yeah,
been my experience. It is possible. But
definitely.
coming from someone who had as this like symptoms of as gnarly as you could imagine,
Yeah.
like it is possible. So that would be my hope.
Totally. That's amazing. And yeah, it's such a great message for people to hear, especially if you're in that place and you feel like there's just no way out. This is impossible. Like, how can I live a life? We don't have the answers, and we're not saying this diet is for everyone or this diet is even the solution. We can't even yet recommend it scientifically because we don't have the evidence through, but we can say what's happened with us and our experience and share that with you, and encourage you to look for all the ways in your life that you can try things. Like, are there things in your diet you can try? Are there things with exercise? Are there things with
Mm.
meditation and mindfulness that you could try? Because you can make a significant improvement in this, and medication is the cornerstone of your recovery. But these things are also um, areas that you can make effort in and improve on, and that alone can be beneficial, just putting in the effort and having the discipline. So we'll try and cover as many things like this as we can, and we're specifically going to focus on this like metabolic side of mental illness,
Mm.
and we're going to try to get to the bottom of what does this mean, and come on this journey with us. And we're going to interview people. We're going to try and just figure this whole thing out. I think you know, like Matt Damon says in The Martian, let's just science the shiz out of this thing. So, but man, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being brave enough to share, and thank you for all you're doing to be healthy, because it's going to inspire other people and help other people
Of course, man.
to do the same. And
Of course.
we'll look forward to speaking to Wim hopefully on the next episode.